10 years ago, I decided I had enough of the American capitalist nightmare, applying to hundreds of jobs with no response, and constantly being looked down upon by my friends, family, and society for not having a job. Rent was getting increasingly expensive, and the few odd jobs I managed to scrounge up here and there were starting to dry up. I knew I had to do something radical, and with how hopeless my situation was, I really had nothing to lose anyways. So I did a quick clinical trial where they tested some phase 3 pharmaceutical drugs on me for about $3,000. I spent $500 of it to buy a one-way plane ticket to Romania, where I planned to just lay low and chill in cheap hostels till I figured something out. I had no backup plans and no idea what I was going to do if I ran out of money, and quite frankly, I didn't care. I had no future in America anyways, and I would have run out of money there too, just way faster. I was going to do my best to survive, but if I ended up just starving to death on the streets as a hobo in a foreign country, so be it. At least I'd be able to enjoy my life until then. I ended up just barely surviving through a combination of learning to cook and eat extremely cheap meals and volunteering in hostels in exchange for free breakfast and accommodation. I never went back to America or got a normal job and kind of just stayed overseas forever to this day. Back in 2015 when I did this, a lot of people thought it was weird or crazy. The economy wasn't quite as doomed as it is now, though the cracks were definitely starting to show. But fast forward to today, and obviously all that's changed thanks to Gen Z. In case you're new to this channel, I consider myself somewhat of a millennial defense lawyer for Gen Z. Delusional older generations and the media are constantly trying to demonize them as being lazy. But the truth is, they're actually smart for recognizing that the system is a broken, rigged game, hard work doesn't pay off anymore, and at this point, it's better to find a way to escape rather than wage slaving away at a soulless 9 to 5, fulfilling someone else's dream and making someone else richer. And recently, I came across this article about how Gen Z is starting to figure out exactly what I saw 10 years ago. They're quitting their jobs with whatever money they might have saved up and just traveling the world forever. This gives me just the slightest bit of hope that young people are gradually finding solutions to escape this soulless 9 to 5 nightmare. This article features Joe Probert, a 28-year-old who left his corporate job in Manchester with 16,000 British pounds in his bank account to take a 6-month trip around South America and Europe. He had an absolute blast in his 6-month odyssey to a point where when his savings dried up and he had to fly home, he got to a point where he burst into tears crying. I was packing up my stuff and I zipped up the last bit of my rucksack and I just burst into tears, he recalls. I'm not really a crier, but it kind of just hit me. I felt sad that my freedom had kind of come to an end. The hardest bit of coming back was accepting that. In December of 2024, Joe landed back in the UK, unemployed, in debt, and living with his parents. He now spends much of his days looking for jobs and taking everything one step at a time. There are definitely days where being in debt and having no job is super stressful, he admits. It impacts plans for the rest of the year. I can't make plans, I feel stuck. He says the hardest part, though, has been accepting the fact I am going to be glued to a desk again. Joe has struggled to articulate his experiences to anyone who wasn't there with him. I want to keep talking about my trip as much as possible. I just don't want to forget anything, he says. Well, Joe, plenty of people like myself can totally 100% relate to you. Maybe not the delusional older generations who think all there is to life is work, but we certainly know exactly how you feel here. Unfortunately, this story doesn't quite have a happy ending. Not yet anyways. But there is a bit of a silver lining as Joe has realized that this is not the life he wants, and as a result, he's changed his priorities to searching for a remote job that offers better work-life balance and would allow him to potentially travel again. I just really don't want to feel like I'm going back into such a strict office environment, he says. And despite his difficulties, Joe would do it all again, adding, I don't regret anything, even being in this situation now and being jobless and looking for work. Money comes and goes, and it won't be long until I'm back on my feet. The reason I like this story so much is because it shows a young man chasing his dreams of escaping the 9 to 5. But it also shows the brutal realism that life isn't the movies and there's no guarantee of a happy ending. That being said, as someone who did manage to escape and just travel forever, there's a couple things Joe could have done differently that could have guaranteed he would have escaped for good. Traveling is an insane cheat code for anyone who wants to escape the 9 to 5. So, here are some practical tips I want to share with those of you who are watching who might be considering going this route yourself. This 16,000 British pounds Joe saved up was way more than enough to sustain himself for at least several years. Escaping the 9 to 5 is way more about minimizing consumption and not about earning a ton of money. You can volunteer in hostels for free accommodation in exchange for about 20 hours of very chill and easy work per week, which is a way better deal than working 60 hours a week for these dogshit wages, which won't pay you enough to afford these ridiculous rent prices anyways. And you can use this time to learn to cook cheap, healthy meals for yourself. When you consider rent and food are the most expensive expenditures when you're a young traveler, once you eliminate these, you can get your total living expenses to just $100 or $200 per month, especially when you consider everything is a lot cheaper overseas as well. It is a minimalist but very fulfilling life. You can't buy a lot of fancy things, but eventually you realize you don't need to. You lose the ability to afford material possessions, but you gain back 8 hours a day of your time that would have been lost to wage slavery. Some might say that this is living like a hobo, but with how bad the economy is now, with these dogshit wages and insane cost of living, you're going to be living like a hobo anyways, even if you do work. So what's even the difference at this point anyways? Might as well at least enjoy your time and your youth. For those of you who are more interested in this lifestyle, I've made an entire video guide here on how you can pull it off. You can check it out right here. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.